Now, there are a lot of other things that we could get to. There are a ton of things, and, SmackDown kind of is what it is right now, and it's not driving me up the wall in the best way. But there was one last thing that came out, and it broke on Twitter, as I mentioned at the start of the show, just before we came on. But it's an agreement between the WWE and TNA. And it's a press release that they put out where they talked about this unprecedented crossover opportunity between WWE and TNA. So we're going to pull up the press release that WWE and TNA put out jointly, and I'll give you some high-level thoughts on what I think it ultimately could mean and whether or not it's a good thing or not. Now, I think if you're a TNA fan, it is a good thing. There are people that always like to argue about whether or not this has been a more beneficial partnership with WWE than the one that they had previously with AEW. AEW tended to send a few more of their star-level people, like when Kenny Omega was the world champion. I'm not exactly sure that having some of the NXT people that have been on TNA have been the most helpful, but I think the exposure is good, and the exposure for the company as a whole is good. But here you go. WWE and TNA Wrestling announced multi-year partnership. NXT superstars and TNA wrestling stars to appear across weekly WWE and TNA programming, WWE premium live events, and TNA pay-per-views. And so they have this whole thing about the unprecedented crossover opportunities. It's going to enable talent to garner additional exposure across key WWE and TNA programming, including weekly flagship shows like NXT on the CW, TNA Impact, select WWE premium live events, and TNA pay-per-views. In turn, bolstering their in-ring development with exposure to world-class talent and coaching. Now, listen, you can say what you want to say about whether or not this partnership has worked to this point, and whether or not WWE was going to poach Jordynne Grace and Joe Hendry and leave TNA with nothing to show for this somewhat limited partnership to this point. It's hard to look at this and feel like it's anything but a win for TNA. Because one of two things was going to happen here, right? There was a path that like WWE was just going to poach your talent no matter what. In this case, you're getting the continual exposure. Will WWE on NXT start promoting TNA pay-per-views on their TV? That would be interesting. Is TNA now going to promote NXT PLEs on Peacock? That will be interesting. It certainly appears as though the Genesis pay-per-view is going to be the first real crossover because TNA put out a video, and I don't know how this works with them and how they respond to this kind of stuff on YouTube, but it is simply promoting something they put on their own social media account. But there was here it is. So this was the trailer that they put out. Maybe I'll show it to you guys here without any of the sound. I think that might help us get around it. But they put this out. Hashtag TNA Genesis at WWE NXT this Sunday. And then here's your trailer. So you get very clearly like a hype video, including the NXT logo, including the TNA logo. And then here it is. The chance of TNA in the background. You get TNA Genesis NXT. Here's the lasting image. This is the thing that stands out to you and makes you say, all right, they are officially co-branding. Like there's no getting around it. Now, it's a TNA pay-per-view. How are they going to split the revenue on pay-per-view? How are they going to split the gate? No one knows. Doesn't really matter to you as a fan. Doesn't really matter to me. Presumably matters to those companies. But you're getting a TNA and NXT co-branded pay-per-view. It's interesting. Now, again, will we see Obafemi pop up in TNA? Who knows? Are we going to see Ethan Page? Or no. Let me think. Could we maybe see Nick Nemeth show up at the Royal Rumble? Would he be Dolph Ziggler or would he be Nick Nemeth? Will the Hardys show up with the tag team titles at the Royal Rumble? Will we go that far? Will we see TNA talent on Raw and SmackDown? Could there be another invasion angle? Presumably you can't do an invasion angle if you're a partnered company. It then feels like, well, of course, you're working together. Now, could they try to build a storyline where, yes, we're partners, but we need to show that we're the better promotion? Yeah, like you could maybe do that. Ultimately, it feels like TNA is becoming, for better or worse, a feeder system for NXT/the WWE. Now, if you want to talk about whether that's good or not for the lifelong opportunity that TNA has and the long-term future of the company, I'd say that, yeah, it probably is. Because could this exposure eventually get you to a point where they can negotiate a better deal as part of Anthem to move to a bigger network than just Access TV? Maybe it does. If the ratings actually start to pop or they start getting a bigger social following, could they maybe figure out a way to get on another platform? It's entirely possible. And you're also getting additional reps for your best stars in TNA potentially. And WWE is getting actual live TV reps, seeing how their NXT talent perform in front of another audience. It's a win-win for both of these companies. Now, the sad thing is, if you're AEW and you're looking at this from the outside, WWE is now working with TNA. They've sent some talent like Omos to Noah. You have New Japan and sort of have CMLL, I guess. The downside is New Japan just lost their TV deal in the US. I don't know how many people are actively watching CMLL. You don't have a place right now where you could get weekly episodic TV reps for some of your younger talent. Like if you were going to send a Yuta, a Garcia, a Perry for months to go somewhere else to get those live reps every week, it would have been nice if you had a partnership with TNA and you could have sent them over there and made it look like they had signed talent contracts with TNA or announced something like this where there's a partnership, but you don't have that. I think one of the biggest problems that AEW faces right now is that their young talent especially don't get enough reps. They don't have a touring schedule. They have 2 shows. They have Ring of Honor. They, for whatever reason, seem to refuse to have some of those talent develop down in Ring of Honor and allow more of the big stars to get weekly episodic time on Dynamite and Collision. They won't do a brand split. AEW, I think, needed something like this. I think it would have helped their talent tremendously. And instead, WWE swooped in, inked a deal with TNA. It appears to have been a very positive partnership to this point, and now it's a multi-year agreement.